Nukitashi has been getting a lot of attention lately due to the anime adaptation. The anime is, of course, based off of the visual novel of the same name by developer Qruppo. Nukitashi lures people in with the premise of an island where sexual acts are not only encouraged, but mandated by law. This might sound like it would be the plot of a Nukige or Hentai, but it's actually an extremely political story about fighting against this fascist system. I read it back when the English translation came out in 2023. I planned to make a video on it, but ended up having mixed feelings on it. I love the political commentary and a lot of the ideas, but the constant sexual humor and silliness became exhausting. Not to say that it wasn't funny, it was at first. But after the novelty of the sex jokes wore off, I found it to be annoying. I ended up not checking out the sequel either, though it's supposedly a lot better. That brings us to the subject of today's video, Qruppo's next visual novel, Hentai Prison. It was a game I was aware of even before Nukitashi. It has been lauded as a modern visual novel classic, a masterpiece, a kamige. Just look at VNDB and you can see a host of 10 out of 10 scores. Although wary after my experience with Nukitashi, I had to give in to the temptation to try it out when it was released in English earlier this year. I heard that it was a somewhat darker and more serious story compared to Nukitashi, which had me intrigued. How true are all of these claims and praise? Much like Nukitashi, the answer is complicated. Hentai Prison follows Minato Shuichiro, a young man with an obsession with exhibitionism. He argues that it's his method of self-expression, that his intentions are not perverse in the slightest, but naturally society does not care. After one incident too many, he's sentenced to 10 years in Tulip Prison. Tulip Prison is where people guilty of sexual crimes are sent. It's a harsh place located on a remote island, making escape virtually impossible. The setting of this prison is pretty unique for a visual novel. While common in Western movies and TV series like Prison Break, that kind of prison setting is seldom used in anime and Japanese games. The only examples that come to mind are Prison, School, and part of Rainbow. There's also the prison arc of Baki, which is one of my favorite parts of the series. Anyway, having a prison setting is exciting as it can lead to a lot of tension and escape hijinks. I have heard a couple people complain that parts of the setting fall flat because the enforcement of the rules is inconsistent. There is a degree of truth to this. Tulip Prison has strict rules regarding behavior or speech, banning anything that could be considered sexually provocative because of the inmates are all sex offenders. Yet the characters get away with making raunchy jokes and such, and that kind of action should get them punished. This inconsistency is addressed by the narrative, as it explains that most guards are actually pretty lax about enforcing these rules. They can often be bribed or convinced to look the other way, except for a few who are serious about their jobs. This makes some sense, as being a guard is just another shitty 9-to-5 job. I doubt they would want to make more work for themselves. The guards make a big show in the beginning to intimidate new arrivals. Combine that with how they routinely humiliate inmates by invading their privacy, and you can see how all this is done to deter prisoners from stepping out of line in the first place. This might sound like it would remove all the tension, and it does in a way, but the ones in power in the prison are still very dangerous. I've talked about prison movies before, but if I had to say the biggest influences to the story that I noticed, it would be a combination of Prison, School, The Shawshank Redemption, and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It has the ecchi humor of Prison School, the themes of freedom from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and even visual homages to Shawshank Redemption. Escape from Alcatraz also feels like a big influence, as it's directly referenced and some plot beats are similar to the movie. Anyway, getting back to Hentai Prison, the common route is a little slow. The beginning is about Minato adjusting to prison life, which sounds like it should be interesting, but it didn't grab me. The story didn't really click for me until towards the end of the common route, where Minato forms a group of allies to make an eroge together. It's here that the greater ideas of the narrative about self-expression and eros became apparent. The writer's love for eroge shines through. The story feels like a love letter to eroge at certain parts, showing a passion for the subject that I found invigorating. Minato's passion for this project got me more invested than anything before. You get lots of interesting facts about the development of visual novels that only developers would be able to give. Shuichiro forms a group to help him, made up of the programmer Noah Kuribayashi, the Yakuza artist Taeka Hate, and the enigmatic writer Chisato. These are also the main heroines, of course. In this ragtag group, Shuichiro finds a place of belonging he never felt in the outside world. On the team, he takes the position of the producer, ensuring that the rest of the group have everything they need to complete the project. The story does showcase how important it is to have a good producer, something most people probably don't think about too much. Often the success of a movie or game is attributed to a director or writer, but these are group endeavors, and even producers can be integral to creating art. It also shows how catastrophic a bad producer can be, as the antagonist of that arc is the character called the Eroducer, who has no respect for the art. He just wants to stick his name on a finished product and pretend he made it. The way he's characterized and described reminded me of some less than savory things I've heard about Eddie Shankier, the guy who produced that terrible Devil May Cry show. Getting back on track, Qruppo finds the process of creating this visual novel to be a creative outlet that's even healthier and more fulfilling than his exhibitionism. Naturally, this can't last. Qruppo Prison is a place that punishes sexual deviancy. There's no way they'd ever allow the development of an eroge. This marks the end of the common route and the beginning of the character routes. As engrossing as this arc was, there's one problem I have with it, which is a problem the whole game suffers from. That would be the repetition. The story keeps reinforcing how important each team member is by constantly stating the role. They go from one scene, saying that Noah is the programmer, Taeka is the artist, Chisato is the writer, to another scene basically saying the same thing again, after they all do their thing. Not a huge deal, but it's something that stuck out to me as being strange and unnecessary. This kind of repetition of information is noticeable at a couple other points, notably a little gambling arc in Chisato's route. It didn't ruin my enjoyment of the story or anything, but it's a slightly negative aspect to the writing. There are 4 routes in total, one for each of the main heroines, and one final grand route, once you finish the other 3. You can do these initial 3 routes in any order, but the order I would suggest is Chisato, Taeka, and then Noah. You could probably swap Chisato and Taeka if you really wanted to, but Noah feels like it should be done last. I'd simply suggest doing Chisato first, because it's the shortest and has the best start. A major problem I have with Nukitashi was how similar the routes were. They all had the same main objective of finding a girl which would somehow help them repeal the pervert law. The routes felt kinda samey, because they ended up sharing similar plot elements, and even the climaxes were fairly similar. I'm happy to say that Hentai Prison fixes this problem. Each route starts with Shuichiro's objective, to resume development of his visual novel, but end up going in wildly different directions. It could be somewhat boiled down to having a similar structure. Shuichiro bonds with the heroine, then the villain of the route gets in the way and punishes him, which causes him to swear vengeance. However, I find the events themselves to be different enough to not get tiresome or end up feeling too similar. The first route I'll talk about is Chisato's. Chisato herself is probably my favorite of the main heroines. He's timid, they don't want to talk much, and can be awkward in conversations. He's just like me. He's known for darkly captivating poetry that's posted in the prison newspaper, which is why Shuichiro recruits her. She also has this really cute laugh that she often does. I think her awkward mannerisms in general can be quite charming. He's the most mysterious of the 3 main heroines. Not much is known about her in the beginning, and she doesn't even wear the same uniform as the other prisoners. Who exactly is she, and why is she in this prison? Route sets out to answer these questions about her, as Shuichiro grows closer to her. I find the relationship to be really sweet. Chisato finally has someone to open up to. The antagonist of this route is Hazuki Yugao, the warden of the Serious Crimes Ward. She's called the Queen Bee, because she's seen as the de facto leader of the prison. She controls the SST, the most militant disciplinary force at the prison. Basically, she has an elite combat unit at her beck and call. She rules the prison with fear, severely punishing anyone that steps out of line. Unfortunately, she has an irrational hatred of Chisato, which causes Shuichiro to become her enemy. He's the most fearsome and contemptible foe. He makes Shuichiro Chisato's life hell. Chisato's life has already been hell, but I guess now she has Shuichiro to share her suffering with. Seeing our elite suffer so much makes the moment where they overcome Yugao all the more cathartic. Overall, a pretty good route. There's even a big focus on gambling, which reminded me a bit of Kaiji. Next, I'll talk about Taeka's route. Taeka is a Yakuza leader. In the prison, she's given the position of mediator to smooth out disputes between prisoners. She's someone with influence outside and inside of the prison. She tries to get Shuichiro to join her Yakuza group, but declines because he doesn't want to be a criminal. She tries to get Shuichiro to join her Yakuza group, but he declines because he doesn't want to be a criminal. In this route, he does become a mediator and works with her group. I think the start to this route is slower than Chisato's. This is because of Taeka's annoying entourage. I call them the Three Stooges. Taeka has three main followers that I find to be a bit grating at times. They mostly exist for bad jokes. They do have more serious moments later to show how loyal they are to Taeka, which is why I can't hate their inclusion. Their presence in early Taeka's route just made it harder for me to get invested compared to Chisato's route. I think the story really gets going later, when the villain makes himself present and isolates Taeka from her followers. The villain of the route is Julia Agatsuma, the warden of the sex crimes ward and the pastor of the prison's church. She's Uga's rival and wanting to be chairman of the prison. She is a fascinating character, as charming as she is deranged. She's a real cult of personality that is essentially a cult leader. There's a lot to love about her character. While in Chisato's route, she was a shady ally. In this route, she takes the role of the scheming villain. Yugao is Shujiro's ally here, as opposed to being the villain in the other route. This is something I love about the routes of Hentai Prison. I'll turn everything you expect from a previous route on its head to give you a new perspective on these characters. I talked about what a loathsome villain Yugaya was, a complete sadist that reveled in the suffering of others. However, I must say that she's my favorite character in the story, and Taiko's route is why. Here you see a softer side to her, as she bonds with Shujiro and Taika. She can be cruel, but she does care about those under her command. This is also shown with Otabe, the commander of the SST, who genuinely loves Yugaya and is fiercely loyal to her. Yugaya might be a bit condescending towards her, but she does care about her in turn. Yugaya does have an irrational hatred for Chisato, but that is due to a trauma from her past. It doesn't make her treatment of Chisato acceptable, but it does make her actions more understandable. I think Shuichiro has a positive influence on her. He proves himself useful to her, which I think makes her rethink ruling the prison through fear, instead going for a carrot and the stick approach, meaning that she rewards those that behave and punishes those who do not. She even starts to slowly treat Chisato better. Yugaya is just a fantastic character that I couldn't help but love. Julia is her opposite in many ways. While Yugaya rules with power and fear, Julia utilizes manipulation and cult indoctrination to gain followers. Yugaya has the strength, while Julia has the numbers. Julia is from a rich family, while Yugaya was born into poverty. They're both wonderful characters. Julia is very compelling in her own way. She comes across as more unhinged than Yugaya, but like this story says, her mannerisms feel purposefully theatrical. She has some very interesting parallels with Shuichiro. They're both empty people with loose morals, which is why she feels an odd kinship with him. The main difference between the two is that Shuichiro is able to bond with others, like the main heroines, and grow as a person, while Julia is utterly alone. Even Yugaya has a genuine connection with Otabe, but Julia has nobody. She's a pitiful but amusing character. She's a really cool ally in Chisato's route, while Taeka's route does a great job of making you hate her. As for Taeka herself, she's good. Her main character flaw is her Yakuza pride and unwillingness to rely on others. This is especially true of Shuichiro, because he's not a Yakuza, and she sees him as more of a little brother. Shuichiro does work to make her see him as an equal, and I think the progression of the relationship is satisfying to see unfold. One of my favorite things about them together is how Taeka will sometimes snap back into Yakuza mode when she's embarrassed, like during sex. I also enjoyed how a big part of them becoming closer is Shuichiro asking her to teach him martial arts so he can become strong. There's a lot of tomboyish charm, so I like her quite a bit, but not quite as much as Chisato. The ending of her art is better than Chisato's. It's so cool. Noa is the last of the main heroines. It begins much like the others, with Shuichiro bonding with Noa, the two cooperating to eventually escape the prison. The big focus of this route is the warden of the obscenity ward, Sophia, and her relationship with Noa. Sophia is a very interesting character on her own. She starts off on bad terms with Shuichiro, relentlessly bullying him. There's an arc in the common route about it. After that arc, she does lighten up significantly, and ends up reluctantly helping Shuichiro in a number of situations. Noa's route reveals why she was so harsh on him, and delves into what makes her tick. She's a genuinely kind-hearted person, but life in Tulip Prison has left her disillusioned with the idea of rehabilitation. After seeing so many people come and go and come back again, they begin to wonder if these people are better left permanently locked up so they never hurt anyone again. There's more to it than that. He's a very well-written character. Her relationship with Noa is also very complex. They have complicated feelings towards one another. Noa loves Sophia. She's the object of her adoration, to a worrying degree. Her problem is that she doesn't realize that reality might not match up to her ideal image of Sophia. The way the relationship between Noah and Sophia develops is extremely well done. They don't suddenly become close, it's a slow, gradual process. The reason I said this route is best tackled last is because the villain of this route is Yugayo and Julia. Shuichiro, Noah, and Sophia must somehow take down both of them if they want to escape. Previous routes had you take on one of them, but taking down them both will be a real challenge. It references some stuff from other routes, which might ruin reveals there if you did Noah's route first. Shuichiro does have Sophia as an ally here, but she doesn't have nearly the kind of sway Yugayo or Julia have. The battle of wits in this route is really cool to see unfold. It is my favorite climax of the 3 heroine routes. The battle against the 2 wardens is truly exhilarating. Noah herself is a pretty fun character. She's a genius and excels at basically anything she sets her mind to. Her problem is that she has low emotional intelligence and doesn't realize when her ideas don't match reality. I don't like her as much as Chisato and Taeka, but she's solid on her own, and her relationship with Sophia is really well done. Last is, of course, the grand route. It's the true ending that combines elements of the previous routes to create the most complete story. In it, Shuichiro tries to get permission to make his eroge in the prison from the prison director, Miko Mizushiro. In exchange, he's tasked with proving himself by exposing the wardens to be unfit as her successors. So, it kind of has an abridged version of previous arcs about defeating the wardens and helping the heroines overcome their personal problems. They are short and different enough from what happened previously. I think Sophia's arc here about reconciling with Noah suffers the most here from being so rushed. I think the slow process of Sophia warming up to Noah was some of the best parts of Noah's route, though seeing it so rushed is a shame. I guess the audience has already seen it happen, so they already experienced the more satisfying version of this arc. But it is unfortunate that the canon final route kinda rushes their relationship. Anyway, the interesting stuff starts after Shuichiro proves himself and defeats the wardens. This stuff is entirely new, don't talk too much about it, but this is when the route gets really good. A big focus of this route is the relationship between Shuichiro and Mizushiro. Mizushiro could be considered the main antagonist of the story, though only making rare appearances before the grand route. He is the one who created Tulip Prison and the inhumane systems within it. He is a mysterious character because she can be extremely cruel at times, but then turn and help Shuichiro. Her true motivations are mysterious. Essentially, she represents censorship, as one of her big goals is to completely censor and get rid of pornography. She believes that can cause sexual crimes because of how it can influence people. You've probably heard such arguments before. It's a central theme of the story that I'll talk about later, but she's a very interesting villain from a thematic perspective. There's a reason she's so pro-censorship, that's rooted in a traumatic incident from her past. This makes her come across as more of a nuanced character, not simply a caricature of a pro-censorship ideals. Her relationship with Shuichiro is equally compelling. Shuichiro starts to see her as a mother or grandmother that he never had because he was neglected by his parents. In turn, Mizushiro sees him as a son she never had and tries to mold him to fit her ideals. They do care about each other, which makes the inevitable fallout all the more tragic. I also love the way the route delves into Shuichiro's character and why he is the way that he is. If I had one criticism of the last part of the grand route, is that felt too similar to the end of the true route of Nukitashi. Don't get me wrong, the climax is fun. Wouldn't do anything that truly surprised me. Went basically how I expected, but seeing this grand send-off to all the characters in the story was nice. All in all, a satisfying conclusion, and overall the best part of the game, even with the couple gripes I have with it. I should talk about the humor and general tone of the story. Despite being set in a prison, the tone is fairly lighthearted a lot of the time. There's a lot of goofy jokes and sexual humor. Very similar to Nukitashi, which thinks that the pinnacle of humor is saying Dick Slayer instead of Demon Slayer. It's crude, juvenile, and can get a little grating. Luckily, I think there's slightly less of the humor compared to Nukitashi. It mostly comes from random faceless inmates chiming in about their bizarre fetish, like that one lady of the slipper fetish. The best jokes have nothing to do with sex. They usually come from Shuichiro taking everything literally. It generally does feel more grounded, even though some parts can be kind of ridiculous. It never reaches the heights of absurdity, like the Masaki route of Nukitashi. Certain parts of Hentai Prison can be kinda dark, such as when Shuichiro is put into solitary confinement. It shows just how painful and inhumane such a punishment is. It never gets super dark because of all the comedy, so don't expect it to be as dark as Mega Bates or anything, but it is a bit darker than Nukitashi. Despite all the humor, it does know when to get serious. There are long stretches of characters just having sincere conversations. One of my favorites being Shuichiro's talk with Chisato while they're in the damned ward. Nukitashi can be sincere too, sometimes. That's why I love Rei's character, but Hentai Prison felt a bit more serious and focused to me. I've mentioned Nukitashi a lot, so you're probably wondering if it's necessary to play it before Hentai Prison. While the events and setting of Nukitashi are referenced slightly, I think Hentai Prison stands fine on its own. The references to Nukitashi do feel like fanservice sometimes, but there is a thematic point to it. Nukitashi and Hentai Prison complement each other very well, though they initially seem like they have opposite premises. Hentai Prison doubles down on the themes of Nukitashi. Nukitashi is about an island where the culture has come to revolve around sex because of a law mandating intercourse. The protagonist, Junosuke, opposes this law because he believes that sex is nothing without love. This law is also used to discriminate against minorities like gay people, and his own sister happens to be a lesbian. What's interesting is that sex itself is not framed negatively. It's just that the law forces people to have sex, even when they might not want to. It's all done just so the ones at the top, like the governor Hiroura, can benefit. Junosuke eventually even comes to an understanding and appreciation of the islanders, which tempers his views on sex. Hentai Prison is set a while after the events of Nukitashi. By then, a lot of information about Seteran Island has been censored, but Shuichiro finds out about it in prison. He sees it as an ideal paradise because it accepts everyone, regardless of their fetish or social status. Tulip Prison is a place for weirdos who don't fit into society to be tortured and forced into labor until they are able to conform to society's values. Of course, Shuichiro sees Seteran Island as a place of sexual liberation, a place that one could bear their nakedness without shame. Plays out accept an outcast like him. The ending of the Grandra in particular hits a bit harder if you've experienced Nukitashi. In addition, there is one returning character from Nukitashi, Rin Hanamura. She was a fairly minor character in Nukitashi, but here she's given a slightly bigger role. One of the more amusing similarities it has to Nukitashi, so I found the wardens to be better characters than the main heroines. In Nukitashi, antagonist girls in the SS are widely agreed to be better characters than the heroines in the No Love, No Sex Brigade. It is interesting that both stories focus so much on making compelling antagonists that they end up better written than the heroines. In summary, I don't think playing Nukitashi before Hentai Prison is strictly necessary, but it is something that I'd recommend to better appreciate the themes of the narrative. Time to delve into the characters. I can't believe I've talked this long without properly appreciating the main man himself, Shuichiro. He is a fascinating and thoroughly compelling protagonist. His most notable quality is his tendency to take everything he's told at face value. This might make him sound dumb, but he can be quite smart sometimes. It's simply that he's childishly naive. He reminds me a bit of Gon from Hunter x Hunter. Now he's not held back by conventional morality, and he'll pick up whatever people tell him. They're filled with innocent wonder for the world. What morals he does abide by have more to do with not wanting to make his sister sad. That's why I didn't want to join Taeka's Yakuza family. Not necessarily because of the illegal things they do, but rather that being a Yakuza would upset his sister. Poor Shuichiro, his unusual morals and willingness to think outside the box is what makes his scheme successful. It's also something pointed out by a few characters to be dangerous. His childishness is something that's a strength, but also a character flaw. One of my favorite things about him is how he constantly says, "Big sorry, bro." This is a phrase he learns from Rin, and it says a lot about his character. Rin taught him to say this as a way of appropriately apologizing in prison. In reality, it was a way for her to humiliate him, along with the other nonsense advice she gave him. However, Shuichiro takes this particular advice very seriously. All throughout the game, he says, "Big sorry, bro." Even during serious moments, even after it's revealed Rin is deceiving him, he clings to this phrase. It showcases how easily impressionable he is, but it also shows how meaningful this initial encounter with Rin was to him. It's the one piece of her advice that he takes with him throughout the entire game. Another really intriguing aspect of his character is his reason for exhibitionism. He says it's his way of self-expression, but there's a bit more to it than that. Shuichiro talks to his dick, and it actually talks back. He calls it Amatsu, and considers it his only friend. He wants others to witness and acknowledge Amatsu, which is why he's always getting naked. Shuichiro's relationship with his dick is very important to the narrative. The way it goes into the psychological implications of his dick having its own ego in the Grand Route is really fascinating. The last integral part of his character is his strong willpower. No matter how much the system screws him, no matter how much he's punished and sent into solitary confinement, he doesn't give up on his ideals. He's a true free spirit. Reminds me a lot of Jack Nicholson's character in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. In summary, Shuichiro is a very compelling protagonist. Parts of him remind me of myself, mostly his stoicism and difficulty in showing his emotions. A couple of other notable characters are Eriko Higuchi, the prison doctor. He's the first adult Shuichiro has ever found trustworthy. He's the one who will sincerely listen to him about his problems and offer advice. He's a reassuring presence in the story. There's Joji Kugitani. He's another prisoner that works as an information broker and provider of smuggled goods. He's another reliable ally for Shuichiro. Then there's Kuso Mori, the professional brown-noser. He's a huge scumbag and an obstacle most of the time. I can't bring myself to really dislike her though. She's so pathetic, it's kind of charming. Ozawa is another prisoner that's initially antagonistic towards Shuichiro, but turns out to be a true bro once you get to know him. I quite like him. Finally, we have Himeru, the perverted and idiotic guard. She only got her position due to nepotism, but she's one of the few guards that is serious about her job. Fortunately, she's easily tricked. She can be a bit annoying at times, but usually I find her antics amusing. She's so beloved that she got her own mini route, was added later in the patch. Now let's talk about the presentation. This is one area of the game that did impress me. For a visual novel, it did a good job of making the scenes feel cinematic. It utilizes a lot of movement of character sprites, as well as camera movement. It reminded me a bit of the presentation of something like the Tsukihime remake. It makes reading it more fun and lively compared to the other visual novels I've read. I think it's a step up from Nukitashi, which already had a solid presentation. Even if the script was losing me, how anyway the scenes were, always retained my interest. The art is nice. It's the same artist and style as Nukitashi. Julia in particular has an excellent design, easily my favorite in the game. I love how her pupils are like crosses, showing the religious element to her character. Yet it's not a normal cross. It's sharper, which I think shows her twisted cult religion. It also makes her piercing glare more intimidating. It always seems like she knows more than she lets on, that she's untrustworthy. She has the most incredibly unhinged expressions as well. So yeah, she's the most well-designed and expressive character. I kinda wish there was more CGs. The ones they have look fantastic, but I wish there was a couple more. There's enough 18 CGs, but not that many for normal scenes, which is unfortunate. I guess it makes up for it having such animated normal scenes. The music is pretty good. It suits the vibe of the game and enhances certain scenes. There's a decent amount of tracks, but I don't think any one of them stands out too much. It's not the kind of music I'd actively seek out after finishing the game, like I do with Rewrite, but it does its job well. Overall, really nice production values. I'd say Hentai Prison might be worth trying just to see how vibrantly animated the game is. Time to talk about the arrow scenes. It is called Hentai Prison. With a name like that, you'd probably go in expecting a ton of arrow. As it turns out, it's actually fairly light on age scenes. There's only a couple in the main story, like 2 per heroine. The wardens all get one scene. The bulk of the arrow content are in the epilogues you unlock after completing a route. The epilogue for the Grandeur is essentially a bunch of age scenes, as if to make up for how little there are in the rest of the story. The narrative reasoning for these scenes is alright. They're mostly there to show Shuichiro's intimacy with the heroine, but I'd argue the existence of these scenes is important to the themes of the story. The whole narrative is a love letter to eroge, how important erotic works can be, so of course they'd include ero in their work. Like Amatsu says, art is one place where it's okay to be self-indulgent. These scenes are exactly that kind of beautiful self-indulgence. They exist because the developers really love ero. The scenes themselves are pretty vanilla. My favorite might have to be Julia's. It might be the most awkward sex scene I've ever read. It's on purpose. The two have an odd connection, and Shuichiro obviously isn't into it. It's a weird scene, but it's engaging. Finally, let's talk about the themes of Hentai Prison. It covers a wide variety of ideas and topics, but the one that resonated with me the most is the power of using art as self-expression. As I've mentioned, Shuichiro's desire to create this visual novel is the main motivation throughout the heroine routes, especially the Grand route. The story he comes up with for his visual novel is a way for him to vent about his feelings of loneliness and alienation. He grows to see developing this visual novel to be a substitute for his exhibitionism. Shuichiro's time in Tulip Prison turns into a journey of self-discovery. He's surrounded by outcasts like he is. For the first time, he finds friends he can rely on. This makes his time in prison some of the happiest in his life, despite the circumstances. He comes to find creating this eroge to be a healthier outlet for his desire of self-expression compared to his streaking, which is what got him into prison in the first place. While Shuichiro stands for freedom, Mizushiro stands for control and censorship. She argues that erotic content can inspire sexual deviancy and sex crimes. Now, the argument of whether fiction can affect reality is something people have been debating for ages, and it's something with a bit more nuance than what either side wants to admit. When I was in high school, I watched a boxing anime called Hajime no Ippo. I was inspired by the protagonist and started going to the gym and working out. This is fiction affecting reality. Fiction does have the power to inspire people to better themselves. However, that can only happen if one lets it. Playing Doom won't suddenly turn you into a mass murderer, and liking lolies isn't going to turn you into a pedo. There are people that can't tell the difference between fiction and reality, but those kinds of people are rare, with much deeper issues than whatever fiction they enjoy. Blaming fiction on the actions of individuals is always a scapegoat. Ultimately, people are responsible for their own actions. Art has infinitely more potential for good, even erotic art. It can be used as an outlet to express one's innermost feelings or as a way to cope with trauma. As Shuichiro says, real harm can be reduced by letting people have a release through fantasy. Art is an important thing, especially to me. I wouldn't call these videos art, but they are my way of expressing my appreciation of stories I do enjoy. Seeing governments try to ban erotic art infuriates me, as do the kinds of people who defend such authoritarian nonsense. Banning erotic content will not suddenly fix society or make sex crimes go away. It just punishes those trying to seek a release through fantasy. Shuichiro standing against this kind of censorship to the point of refusing to even use mosaics is something that I could truly root for. Recently, payment processors have been cracking down on erotic content. Steam saw several games suddenly delisted, and even itch.io is taking out multiple games without warning or reason. The government and payment processors are trying to control what you're allowed to create or buy. It's wrong. It just makes the ero-positive message of Hentai Prison even more poignant. It's an important story for standing firmly against that kind of censorship in a time where it grows sadly more common. In conclusion, Hentai Prison is a gem of a story, however a flawed one. The jokes don't always land, but many other aspects certainly do. It has stylish presentation and a fun cast of characters. It's a story that I have to recommend, especially in the current state of the world. In a time where eroge are becoming less common and even outlawed, Hentai Prison shines by showing a sincere love for eroge and art in general. I think it's a big improvement over Nukitashi 1. Enough convinced me that I need to go back and read Nukitashi 2 at some point. You can buy Hentai Prison and Nukitashi on Steam, as well as other storefronts like Jest and Joran. If you get one on Steam, make sure to get the patch from Shirobune for the full game. Qruppo has proven themselves to be a very capable studio, providing laughs and scathing social commentary. I'm quite curious to see what they'll make next. If you made it this far, thanks for watching.